Gunshots echoed across Blackwater Valley, shattering the dawn's stillness. 3 rifle reports in quick succession, followed by the distinctive whine of bullets cutting through air. Cole Blackwood threw himself behind a moss-covered boulder, the rough granite scraping his weathered hands as he drew his Colt .45 Peacemaker from its worn leather holster. The weapon felt like an extension of his arm, 7 inches of blued steel with ivory grips polished smooth from 20 years of handling. The Peacemaker had been with him since Antietam, a battle that claimed 23,000 men in a single day. Now, on this Montana morning in 1878, it might save his life once more. Cole thumbed back the hammer with practiced precision. 6 rounds, 6 chances to survive. "Come on out, Blackwood," a voice called from the ridge above. "Callahan says it's time you learned your place in this valley." Cole recognized that voice. Jake Harper, one of Victor Callahan's hired guns. The same man who'd threatened 3 smaller ranchers last month. The same man who'd burned down the McPherson barn when they refused to sell. Sweat trickled down Cole's spine despite the morning chill. Montana Territory, 1878, a land of breathtaking beauty and unforgiving brutality. A place where disputes were often settled with lead rather than law. Cole had hoped those days were behind him. After 15 years of bloodshed, first during the war between the states as a major in the Union Army's 4th Special Reconnaissance Unit, then as a lawman in the chaotic aftermath, he'd come to this remote corner of Montana seeking peace. The Twin Pines Ranch wasn't much, 320 acres of decent grazing land with a 2-room cabin and a creek that never ran dry, but it was his. Purchased fair and square with money saved during his years wearing a badge. Now, Callahan wanted it, just like he wanted every patch of ground in Blackwater Valley. Another shot kicked up dirt inches from Cole's position. They were getting his range. "That the best you can do, Harper?" Cole called out, his voice carrying across the open ground. "Thought Callahan only hired men who could shoot." The taunt had its intended effect. Harper stood from his position, rifle raised for a better angle. Cole's revolver bucked in his hand, the report deafening in the morning air. 400 yards away, Harper clutched his shoulder and toppled backward with a surprised cry. Instantly, 2 more men emerged from behind the ridgeline, rifles blazing. The first wielded a Spencer repeater, its distinctive firing mechanism recognizable by sound alone. The second carried a newer Winchester .76, a deadly accurate weapon in the right hands. Cole fired twice more, forcing them to retreat. Then, seizing his moment, he sprinted for his horse, a sturdy black Morgan gelding named Thunder, tethered 20 yards away. One fluid motion, and he was in the saddle, urging Thunder into a gallop toward the cover of the pine forest. Bullets kicked up dirt around them, but none found their mark. Cole Blackwood had survived worse odds during the Wilderness Campaign. He would survive this too. The town of Blackwater Creek hadn't changed much since Cole first rode in 3 years ago. A single dusty street lined with false-fronted buildings, Mitchell's General Store, the Silver Dollar Saloon, Wilcox's blacksmith shop, and the sheriff's office. At the far end stood Carson's Hotel, the only 2-story structure in town. Cole tied Thunder to the hitching post outside the sheriff's office, his keen eyes scanning the street for any of Callahan's men. The ambush that morning had been a message. Callahan was done waiting. The wealthy rancher had already forced out 5 smaller operations since spring, adding their lands to his massive Golden Valley Ranch. Twin Pines was next on his list. Sheriff Tom Mitchell looked up from his desk as Cole entered, his weathered face revealing nothing. Mitchell wasn't corrupt, not exactly, but he knew which side his bread was buttered on. And in Blackwater Creek, Victor Callahan did most of the buttering. "Let me guess," Mitchell sighed, leaning back in his chair. "You're here about Harper and his boys taking shots at you this morning." Cole's eyes narrowed. News traveled fast. "You already knew." "Word gets around." Mitchell shrugged. "What do you want me to do about it?" "Your word against theirs. And Harper's already telling anyone who will listen that you fired first." And you believe that? Mitchell avoided his gaze. Doesn't matter what I believe. Callahan's got the judge's ear and half the county in his pocket. Cole leaned forward, palms flat on the sheriff's desk. There's still law in this territory, Tom. Or at least there's supposed to be. Law. Mitchell almost laughed. Out here, law is whatever the man with the most guns says it is. You know that better than anyone. Blackwood. A commotion outside interrupted their conversation. Raised voices, angry shouts. Cole turned to see a crowd gathering in the middle of the street. At its center stood Victor Callahan himself, 60 years old with a silver beard and cold eyes that had seen too much death during the war. A former colonel in the Confederate Army, now the wealthiest man in 3 counties. Flanking him were 4 armed men, and between them stood a woman with her hands bound. Cole stepped onto the boardwalk, hand instinctively resting on his holstered Colt. "Citizens of Blackwater Creek!" Callahan's voice boomed across the street. "Once again, we find ourselves plagued by thieves and outlaws. This woman was caught stealing one of my prize Arabian horses, a crime punishable by hanging in more civilized parts of the territory." The woman stood tall despite her bindings, perhaps 30 years old with auburn hair and defiant green eyes. Her simple dress was dusty from the trail, but there was an undeniable dignity in her posture. Something about her struck Cole immediately, not just her beauty, but the unflinching courage in her gaze. "I stole nothing," she declared, voice steady and clear. "Your men found me on the public trail and decided I must be a thief because I refused to answer their questions." Callahan's face reddened. "My foreman recognized you, Rachel James. Your brother is Henry James, a known criminal with a price on his head. The apple doesn't fall far from the tree." The name registered immediately in Cole's mind. Henry James. They'd served together during the war, part of a special reconnaissance unit behind enemy lines. A good man and a fearless soldier who'd saved Cole's life at Antietam. After the war, rumors spread that Henry had turned outlaw, but Cole never believed them. "I haven't seen my brother in over a year," Rachel replied evenly. "And last I checked, being related to someone isn't a crime." "Consorting with outlaws is," Callahan snapped, "and stealing horses definitely is." Sheriff Mitchell pushed past Cole, finally stirred to action by the public spectacle. "Now hold on, Victor. We can't just accuse people without evidence." "Evidence?" Callahan gestured to one of his men, who held up a woman's handkerchief embroidered with the initials RJ. "Found this in my stable this morning, right after we discovered my best breeding stallion missing. Coincidence that Miss James here was spotted on the road nearby?" The crowd murmured, judgment already forming in their eyes. Cole had seen this before. Frontier justice was swift and often blind. He'd witnessed innocent men hang based on less evidence than a handkerchief. Without fully understanding his own impulse, Cole stepped forward. "That's impossible," he called out, his voice cutting through the murmurs. "Miss James couldn't have stolen your horse, Callahan. She was at Twin Pines Ranch all day yesterday." A stunned silence fell over the crowd. Rachel's eyes widened in surprise, then narrowed in calculation as she quickly understood his intent. "That's right," she added smoothly. "Mr. Blackwood hired me to help with his spring cleaning. I was there from sunrise to sunset." Callahan's face contorted with rage. "You're lying, Blackwood. You don't even know this woman." Cole stepped closer, his 6-foot frame imposing as he locked eyes with Callahan. "Rachel James has been working for me intermittently for weeks. Ask anyone who's visited my ranch recently. They've seen her there." It was a bold-faced lie, but Cole delivered it with such conviction that doubt rippled through the crowd. Sheriff Mitchell looked between them, clearly struggling with this unexpected development. "Is this true, Miss James?" Mitchell asked. "Yes, sir." Her voice never wavered. "Mr. Blackwood can be particular about how his shirts are pressed." A few chuckles broke the tension. Callahan's face darkened further as he realized his public accusation was unraveling. This isn't over. Blackwood, he snarled. Not by a long shot. Never expected it would be, Cole replied evenly. Now, unless you have actual evidence of a crime, I believe Miss James should be released. Mitchell nodded reluctantly, and one of his deputies stepped forward to cut Rachel's bonds. The crowd began to disperse. The morning's entertainment concluded without the hoped-for drama. Cole offered his arm to Rachel with formal courtesy. I believe we should return to the ranch, Miss James. There's still work to be done. Her eyes met his, suspicion mixed with gratitude. She took his arm. Of course, Mr. Blackwood. As they walked toward Thunder, Cole felt Callahan's eyes burning into his back. He just made a powerful enemy even more determined to destroy him. Yet somehow, as Rachel James settled behind him in the saddle, her arms cautiously circling his waist, Cole couldn't bring himself to regret his impulsive decision. Some actions transcended practicality. Some principles were worth fighting for, even dying for. The ride to Twin Pines was conducted in tense silence. Rachel James sat straight-backed behind him, maintaining the minimum contact necessary to stay mounted. Only when the ranch came into view, a modest cabin nestled against a backdrop of twin pine-covered ridges that gave the property its name, did she finally speak. Why did you help me back there? Cole guided Thunder toward the barn, considering his answer carefully. Let's get inside first. These hills have ears. The cabin was simple but solid. 2 rooms with plank floors and a stone fireplace. Gun racks mounted on the walls held an impressive array of weapons. A Winchester .73 rifle, a Sharps .52 caliber Buffalo gun, a double-barreled Greener shotgun, and several handguns, each meticulously maintained. Military maps of the territory covered one table, marked with pencil notations tracking Callahan's expanding holdings. Once inside, Cole secured the door and checked each window before speaking. Old habits from war never truly faded. I knew your brother, he said finally, pouring 2 cups of coffee from the pot warming on the stove. Henry James was one of the best scouts in the Union Army. We served together in the 4th Special Reconnaissance Unit. Rachel's eyes widened. You knew Henry during the war? Cole nodded, sliding a cup toward her. He saved my life at Antietam, pulled me out of Antietam Creek under Confederate fire when I took a Meunier ball to the leg. He tapped his left thigh where an old scar remained. Never got a chance to properly thank him. And now you have, Rachel said softly, wrapping her hands around the warm cup. By helping his sister. That's part of it, Cole admitted. But I also know Henry isn't the criminal they make him out to be. That bank robbery in Kansas City, something never sat right about that story. Rachel's posture stiffened. Henry didn't rob that bank. He was there, yes, but he was trying to stop it. No one would believe him. I would. Cole's gaze was steady. And there's something else you should know. He crossed to a loose floorboard near the fireplace, pried it up, and removed a small bundle wrapped in oilskin. From it, he extracted a man's bandana, blood-stained and torn. 3 days ago, I found your brother collapsed near my north pasture. Bullet wound to the shoulder. He's in the back room, recovering. Rachel gasped, half rising from her chair. Henry's here? Alive? Cole nodded. Fever broke yesterday. He's weak but healing. Took a .44 round through the meat of his shoulder. Clean exit wound, no bone damage. Without another word, Rachel rushed to the back room. Cole heard her soft cry of recognition, followed by murmured conversation. He remained by the fireplace, giving the siblings their privacy, while keeping watch through the front window. Callahan wouldn't let this humiliation stand. Retaliation would come. The only questions were when and how severe. When Rachel emerged 15 minutes later, her eyes were red-rimmed but determined. He told me everything, she said, about Callahan, about what really happened at the bank, and about you. Why you're really out here, alone on this ranch. Cole's jaw tightened. Henry always did talk too much. He said you're gathering evidence that Callahan isn't just a land-grabbing tyrant. He's a war criminal who sold Union troop movements to Confederate agents in exchange for gold. Her voice dropped to a whisper. He said Callahan's treachery got hundreds of Union soldiers killed, including your younger brother at Shiloh. The old wound reopened in Cole's chest. The memory of identifying David's body among the fallen, barely recognizable after Confederate artillery, had found their regiment's position. A position that should have been secret. It's true, Cole confirmed, his voice rough. I've spent 3 years building a case against Callahan, tracking down witnesses, documents, money trails. I'm close, Rachel. That's why he wants me gone. Not just for my land, but because he knows I'm the only one who can bring him down. Rachel studied him with new understanding. And now you've tied my fate to yours by claiming I was working here. You've made me a target too. I'm sorry for that, Cole said sincerely. But Callahan was already gunning for you because of Henry. At least this way, you're not facing him alone. A faint smile touched her lips. My knight in dusty buckskins. Hardly a knight, Cole corrected, just a man with an old debt and a good memory. The moment was interrupted by the sound of approaching hoofbeats. Cole moved swiftly to the window, Winchester in hand. Rider coming, just one. His experienced eye assessed the approaching figure. It's Bill Cooper from the Rocking Sea Friendly. Minutes later, Cooper, a weather-beaten rancher in his 50s, burst through the door, hat in hand and worry etched across his face. Cole, you've stirred up one hell of a hornet's nest, he announced without preamble. Callahan's offering $500 to anyone who brings him proof you're harboring Henry James. He's convinced the sheriff to organize a search party. They're hitting every ranch in the valley starting tomorrow. Cole exchanged glances with Rachel. How many men with Mitchell? He asked. 6 deputies plus Callahan's crew. Maybe 15 guns total. Cooper shook his head grimly. There's more. Callahan's brought in Marcus Reeves. The name hung in the air like gun smoke. The hangman, a hired killer responsible for at least 20 deaths across the Western Territories, famous for his matched set of nickel-plated Smith & Wesson Schofield revolvers that he wielded with deadly precision. Appreciate the warning, Bill, Cole clapped the older man's shoulder. You should go before someone sees you here. After Cooper departed, Rachel turned to Cole, fear finally showing through her composed facade. What do we do now? Cole checked the load in his Winchester, his movements deliberate and unhurried. Now, he said, we prepare for war. By nightfall, Twin Pines Ranch had been transformed into a fortress. Cole had spent years preparing for this confrontation, installing gun ports in the cabin walls, digging a root cellar that doubled as an escape tunnel, and caching weapons and supplies at strategic points around the property. Rachel proved herself remarkably capable, cleaning and loading weapons with practiced efficiency. Henry, though weakened by his wound, insisted on helping, drafting maps of defensive positions and sharing what he knew of Callahan's men. Callahan's foreman Davis is the dangerous one, Henry explained, his voice still raspy from fever. Ex-Confederate cavalry, mean as a rattlesnake and twice as quick to strike, carries a Lamat revolver, 9 shots of .42 caliber plus a shotgun barrel underneath. The others are just hired guns, dangerous enough with numbers on their side. Cole nodded, incorporating this information into his tactical planning. The odds were heavily against them. 3 defenders, 1 wounded, against potentially 15 attackers. But Cole had faced worse odds during the war and emerged victorious through superior positioning and disciplined fire. They'll come at first light, he predicted, studying the terrain from the front window. Classic military approach, we need to thin their numbers before they reach the cabin. Rachel looked up from the ammunition she was organizing. You sound like you've done this before. Wilderness campaign, Cole replied matter-of-factly. Our unit was cut off behind enemy lines for 2 weeks. 12 men against a Confederate regiment. Only 3 of us made it out. And you were one of them, Rachel observed. Cole's expression darkened. Leadership's a heavy burden when men die under your command. Later, as Rachel took the first watch, and Henry finally succumbed to exhausted sleep, Cole found himself alone with his thoughts by the fireplace. The familiar weight of impending violence settled over him like an old coat, unwelcome but fitting perfectly from years of wear. He'd come to Montana seeking peace. But perhaps men like him weren't meant for peaceful lives. Perhaps the skills that kept him alive through the war had marked him permanently for conflict. Dawn approached with agonizing slowness. Cole dozed fitfully in his chair, Colt revolver across his lap, ears attuned to any unusual sound. Rachel woke him just before sunrise, her face pale but resolute. "Riders coming," she whispered. "At least a dozen, approaching from the east." Cole was instantly alert, moving to position without wasted motion. "Wake Henry, then take the back window with the greener. Remember, 2 shots, then move to a different position." She nodded, understanding the tactic. Never stay in one place long enough to be targeted. Cole took his Winchester and moved to the front gun port, surveying the approaching force. Sheriff Mitchell led the column, looking uncomfortable in his official capacity. Behind him rode Callahan himself, silver beard catching the first rays of morning sun. Flanking them were deputies and ranch hands, all armed. And hanging back, watching with predatory patience, was a lean figure on a dappled gray horse, Marcus Reeves, the hangman. His signature Schofields gleamed in custom leather holsters worn high on his hips for a faster draw. Mitchell reined his horse to a stop 50 yards from the cabin. "Cole Blackwood," he called out. "By the authority vested in me as Sheriff of Blackwater County, I order you to surrender Henry James into custody. He's wanted for bank robbery and murder in Kansas," Cole's voice carried clearly through the morning air. "You've been misinformed, Sheriff. The Kansas authorities cleared Henry James 3 months ago. The real culprit confessed on his deathbed." This was news to Mitchell, judging by his startled expression. He turned questioningly toward Callahan, whose face darkened with rage. "He's lying!" Callahan shouted. "James is a wanted man. Blackwood's harboring a criminal." "I have the documents to prove Henry's innocence," Cole countered. "Come to the door alone, Sheriff, and I'll show you." Mitchell hesitated, clearly torn between duty and Callahan's influence. Before he could decide, Callahan lost patience. With a sharp gesture to his men, he spurred his horse toward the tree line. "Burn them out! 500 to the man who brings me James, dead or alive!" The attack came with sudden ferocity, riders splitting to circle the cabin, rifles blazing. Cole's Winchester answered, dropping the lead rider with a shot to the chest. Rachel's shotgun roared from the back window, the heavy buckshot scattering 2 men trying to approach from the rear. For 10 minutes, the air filled with gun smoke and the thunder of weapons. Cole moved from position to position inside the cabin, each shot carefully placed. Rachel proved herself a capable fighter, her fear transformed into focused determination. Even Henry contributed, propped against the wall with a revolver covering the side window. 3 attackers lay motionless on the open ground. 2 more had dragged themselves to cover, wounded. But the remaining force had established positions around the property, settling in for a siege. "They're trying to wait us out," Henry observed during a lull in the firing. Cole nodded grimly. "Or they're planning something worse." His experienced eye had noted men carrying kerosene cans toward the barn. "Fire. They'll try to smoke us out." Rachel looked at him in alarm. "What can we do?" Cole's mind raced through options, discarding each as too risky until only one remained. "The root cellar tunnel," he decided. "It comes out behind the ridge to the north. If we can reach the horses I have hidden in the upper pasture, we might break through their line." "Might?" Rachel questioned. Cole's smile was grim. "War is full of mights, Miss James." Before they could implement this desperate plan, a new sound cut through the sporadic gunfire. a rider approaching at full gallop from the west, waving something white above his head. "Hold your fire!" a familiar voice shouted. "Federal Marshal! Hold your fire!" Through his gun port, Cole recognized Bill Cooper, now wearing a badge on his vest that gleamed in the morning sun. Beside him rode three hard-looking men, similarly badged. Sheriff Mitchell emerged from cover, clearly confused. "Cooper, what the hell is going on?" Cooper reined his horse to a dramatic stop, unfolding an official-looking document. "Thomas Mitchell, by the authority of the United States Federal Court, I'm relieving you of duty pending investigation into corruption charges." He turned toward the besiegers. "Victor Callahan, you're under arrest for treason against the United States, conspiracy to commit murder, and land fraud." For one frozen moment, nobody moved. Then Callahan's voice cut through the silence like a knife. "Kill them all." What followed was chaos. Callahan's men, already shaken by the losses they'd sustained, found themselves caught between their employer's orders and federal authority. Some threw down their weapons, others opened fire on the marshals. Cole burst from the cabin door, Winchester blazing as he provided covering fire for Cooper and his men. Rachel and Henry emerged behind him, creating a crossfire that caught Callahan's remaining loyalists in a deadly trap. Through the gun smoke, Cole spotted Callahan himself, fleeing toward the tree line, making for his horse. Without hesitation, Cole pursued, dodging through scrub brush and rocky outcroppings. Years of pent-up rage and grief fueled his every step. He caught up to Callahan at the edge of the forest. The older man whirled, drawing a derringer from his coat pocket with surprising speed. "You've ruined everything," Callahan snarled, his once commanding presence now diminished by fear and desperation. "You ruined it yourself," Cole replied evenly. Winchester aimed steadily at Callahan's chest. "When you sold out your own men for Confederate gold." "It was war," Callahan's voice cracked. "Everyone was profiting. Why should I have died poor in some God-forsaken battlefield?" "My brother died on that God-forsaken battlefield," Cole said quietly, "because you sold the position of his regiment to the enemy." Understanding dawned in Callahan's eyes. "Blackwood, you're David Blackwood's brother." Cole's finger tightened on the trigger. One squeeze and 3 years of pursuit would end. Justice, or perhaps vengeance, would be served. "Do it," Callahan whispered, a strange relief in his voice. "I've been living with ghosts for 15 years. Maybe death will be quieter." For a long moment, Cole stood frozen between action and restraint. Then, slowly, he lowered his rifle. "No," he said finally. "You don't get the easy way out. You'll stand trial. Every soldier who died because of your treachery deserves to have the truth known." As federal marshals led Callahan away in irons, Rachel approached Cole, touching his arm gently. "You could have killed him," she observed. "No one would have blamed you." Cole watched the man who had haunted his dreams for years being led toward a prison wagon. "That's the thing about vengeance," he replied quietly. "It's a circle with no end. Someone has to break it, or we're all just animals fighting over territory." Rachel studied his face with new understanding. "You didn't come to Montana just for revenge, did you? You came to heal." "Tried to," Cole admitted with a faint smile. "Didn't work out exactly as planned." "Plans rarely do," she said, her hand still resting on his arm, "especially the important ones." 3 months later, Twin Pines Ranch bustled with activity. The barn, burned during the siege, had been rebuilt larger and stronger than before. New corrals housed an expanded herd, the result of Cooper convincing neighboring ranchers to contribute cattle as thanks for Cole's stand against Callahan. Victor Callahan's trial had been swift and conclusive. Documents Cole had gathered over 3 years, combined with testimony from surviving soldiers and financial records seized from Golden Valley Ranch, painted a damning picture of treason and corruption. The judge, a Civil War veteran himself, had sentenced Callahan to life imprisonment at Leavenworth Federal Penitentiary, his once vast holdings divided among those he had wronged. Henry James, fully recovered and officially exonerated, had settled in Blackwater Creek as the new deputy sheriff under Marshal Cooper. His experience tracking outlaws, ironically, made him ideal for law enforcement. And Rachel had stayed. Cole found her at sunset, standing on the ridge overlooking the valley, her favorite spot for watching day transition to night. The last golden light caught in her auburn hair, creating a halo effect that never failed to catch his breath. "Penny for your thoughts," he said, coming to stand beside her. Rachel smiled without turning. "Just thinking about journeys. How sometimes running from something leads you exactly where you need to be." "Philosophy at sunset," Cole observed with a small smile. "Dangerous combination." She turned to face him fully, her green eyes serious despite his attempt at humor. "3 months ago I was trouble, a woman defined by her brother's reputation, with no place to call home." Her gaze swept across the ranch below. "Now I have this: purpose, respect in town, a future." "You earned it," Cole said simply, standing your ground when most would have run. "I learned from a stubborn example," she replied, her smile returning. "A former major who refused to let injustice stand, even when it would have been easier to look away." The comfortable silence between them spoke volumes about how their relationship had evolved, from desperate allies to something neither had yet defined aloud. Cole cleared his throat. "Got a letter today. Army buddy from Virginia is sending a string of thoroughbred mares. Says Twin Pines could become the finest horse breeding operation in the territory with the right stock." "Ambitious," Rachel noted, eyes twinkling. "But then you've never lacked for ambition. Just wondered if you might lack for help expanding like that." Cole looked at her steadily, understanding the question beneath her words. "Thought I might need a partner," he said carefully. "Someone with a good eye for horseflesh and a steady hand with a rifle. Seems like a rare combination of skills." "Practically non-existent," she agreed, moving imperceptibly closer. "A wise man would secure such a partnership formally." Cole's hand found hers, calloused fingers intertwining. "Might require a trip to the preacher in town." "Might," she echoed, eyes bright with promise, "if the terms were agreeable." As the last light faded from Blackwater Valley, 2 figures stood silhouetted against the darkening sky, a man and woman bound together not by convenience or desperation, but by something far stronger forged in the crucible of shared struggle. For Cole Blackwood, the journey from soldier to avenger to rancher had been long and blood-soaked. But standing beside Rachel James as stars emerged above Twin Pines Ranch, he finally glimpsed the peace he'd sought since the war ended. Sometimes trouble, he reflected as they walked hand in hand toward home, was exactly what a man needed to find his way. A week later, as Cole and Rachel rode back from town following their quiet wedding ceremony, they found an unfamiliar figure waiting on the porch of Twin Pines. A young man, perhaps 25, with military posture and cold eyes that reminded Cole of men who'd seen too much battle too young. "Cole Blackwood?" the stranger asked, rising to his feet. Cole nodded, hand instinctively moving closer to his sidearm. "My name is William Thornton," the young man said, "son of General James Thornton, 7th Infantry Division." The name hit Cole like a physical blow. General Thornton had commanded Cole's regiment at Chancellorsville, a brilliant tactician and decent man who died in a Confederate artillery barrage after their position was betrayed. One of the many victims of Callahan's treachery. "I knew your father," Cole said carefully. "He was a good man." William Thornton's expression hardened. "So they say. I wouldn't know. I was too young when he died." His hand rested on a cavalry officer's saber at his hip, his father's by the look of it. I've come a long way to find you, Major Blackwood. There are questions about my father's death that need answering. Rachel tensed beside Cole, sensing the danger radiating from the young man. And you think I have those answers? Cole asked. Thornton's eyes narrowed. You were there. You were his intelligence officer. Some say you could have prevented the ambush that killed him. The accusation hung in the air like smoke. Cole recognized the look in the young man's eyes, the same burning need for justice or vengeance that had driven him for years after David's death. I think, Cole said evenly, this is a conversation best had sitting down, with coffee. A challenge unspoken passed between them. After a long moment, William Thornton nodded stiffly. Coffee would be welcome. It's been a long ride. As they dismounted and led their horses toward the stable, Rachel caught Cole's eye with a questioning glance. He gave her a reassuring nod, though his mind was racing. The past, it seemed, was not as settled as he'd thought. The war that had ended 13 years ago still claimed its casualties. And some battles, Cole realized as he watched the son of his former commanding officer, were just beginning.